desktop and mobile platforms, right? And maybe
Yeah.
beyond that, as well, he may touch concepts. But a slight change in the schedule for the day in the afternoon, okay, right? The next session should be something related to universal design by another set of my students. And afternoon will be the leading half will be a quick lab based on universal design, and then based on one request or a few requests from fellow audience, right? I forgot the faculty's name from SPA Delhi or SPA Vijayawada, I think. Right? So there was a request if we can have one use case where a top-down approach to the concepts of the workshop is connected, right? So I have requested Kenneth to explain his coursework project. Right? I think his coursework project was excellent on the fintech or financial technology side. Okay, so there the objective will be, I think it is from 3:30 to 4:45 today. Okay, so that session the focus will be almost relating the various design concepts, right? And maybe he may even give you some exposure to good tools, open source tools for wireframing, prototype development, etc. Right? So I
Yeah.
hope the audience will benefit from it. Yeah, over to you, Kenneth. Thank you.
1 second. Let me just turn on my video. All right. Yeah. So good morning. Let me just start the presentation. I hope my screen is visible on both the.
Yeah, one room wasn't, I think it's only 30 something. They'll keep it, do not exceed.
Oh, okay, fine.
Second room, if the count exceeds, mercy will indicate.
Okay.
Yeah, video is coming.
Yeah. Great. So yeah, today we'll be talking about interface design for both desktop and mobile platforms. And so we'll fundamentally be talking about the differences in how to approach designing for desktop and mobile. Yeah, so the first step to understand the difference between the two is the interaction medium. So desktop is always controlled by a keyboard and mouse, and now there's a touch interaction too. Whereas mobile has tended towards completely a touch model recently. Almost like every smartphone in the market nowadays has a pure touch interface, and um, while this also has been challenged recently with keyboard and mouse support on mobile platforms, we'll be talking primarily about the like the default way of interaction on each platform. So so the first step in that process is actions and commands. So each of these platforms has, like I said, due to the different interaction mediums which are there for each platform, it causes different sets of actions and commands associated with them. So that would be, for example, different gestures on one platform versus the other, and there will be different forms of menus and UI which follow on each platform. So we'll start with one type of interaction. So one thing I'd like to note is I'm not going to be classifying each of these by their respective platform at first, because like I said, there's been a lot of like cross-platform experiences which have happened. So when I say tap, swipe, and pinch, you generally think of like a touch surface. But like as you can see over here on the left side over here, uh, this has changed. This has basically changed with time, where every laptop has a touchpad, and touchpads have started having the same gestures as smartphones. So the same tap to click, or pinch to zoom and rotate, all of these which used to be there on the smartphone alone. What you see on the right side over here is what the typical smartphone has for multi-touch gestures. The same gestures are carried forward to things like touchpads on both desktops and on laptop. And not just that, it's also carried even to the mice we use. So while it used to be simple right click, left click, and a center button, nowadays mice come with touch surfaces on top, and they also enable the same type of gestures, similar gestures, but not the same ones. There's no pinch to zoom, but they have similar gestures. So yeah, the tap, swipe, and pinch ideology has carried forward across both the mediums equally. And But one thing which is unique to the mobile medium is rotate and shake. So while shake is not used as often nowadays, uh, basically the shake interaction, I'm not sure if people are aware of it. It's common on iOS, and maybe it used to be there on Android, but it's often not regarded as a very healthy interaction, but it exists because mobile phones carry smartphones, gyroscopes, and accelerometers, which can detect movement. So what that enables is basically if you shake your phone um, like this. So when you shake the phone, you get your interaction set. So how it used to be on iPhone is you can shake your phone for like to undo a message or to undo what you've typed, since there's no command Z on the touch platform. And similarly, rotation lock. So this again has some cross-platform appeal right now, since there's laptop come tablets which require you to carry your desktop on the go, and then you can turn it a portrait mode or a landscape mode. But typically, it is something which is part of a mobile computing platform. So be it tablets or smartphones or like nowadays laptops, it's exclusive to mobile platform, not a desktop. You won't rotate a desktop unless you have an external display. So that is another form of interaction which is unique to that medium. And so with those interaction changes, there's also a change in the affordances which follow each of those mediums. So buttons and menus, which are common place on a desktop medium, they are often a certain, like they take advantage of the space which is available on that screen. So what you see over here, for example, the menu, the menu bar of your file explorer in Windows, or the right click contextual menu, which shows up when you right click to perform a task. So this menu will float over your existing interface, and it will be contextually uh, like it will change contextually, where it provides you the right list of features. And same goes for buttons. So buttons have a certain look and feel to them. Now these two items, the menu bar and contextual menus, they both do not exist um, like in a mobile platform as much. There have been like variations of contextual menus where some I think Android does it when you long press, or iOS does it when you 3D touch into the surface. But basically, the menu system is something which requires a lot of space. So you it tends to happen when you have ample space, and that's why it's followed in the tablet format instead of completely on the smartphone and mobile platform. So with those, the another major change between the two platforms is messages. So the way messages are delivered, and messages doesn't just mean texts and all that, just notifications, or how your device notifies you about anything, an alert or an error, anything. So how these messages are delivered to the user, they vary vastly, because one device is handheld. So if you're using your smartphone, you're always using it on your person. So you have it on your hand, and you can feel the tactile. If there is feedback in terms of haptics, you can feel it. While with a smart like a desktop medium, you use mostly your mouse and keyboard, and that generally tends to not provide any like at least not any tactile feedback, except for the clicks and the button presses on your keyboard. So that is one thing which the mobile platform has taken advantage of. There's been a wide use of haptics in everything from gaming to your phone calls to alerts. Because one thing to note, which is very important, is the mobile platform is meant to be meant to deliver your content instantly. So you do not have your desktop, up and available all the time. So if you have something like a bank alert or anything which is time sensitive, they're always targeted towards the mobile platform. So it's important to note that. And now this is done through variety of ways. So there's one, like I said, the haptics happen to notify you, and one, whereas the other two elements over here, which I've pictured over here, both of them are common between both the platforms. So badges are shown to show the number of messages you've received, and that is, again, it is common between both your smartphone applications. You will see the badges on that, and it also has carried forward to the desktop, where it does the same way. And similarly, banners. So banner notifications will be centered and up and center in on the mobile platform, while on desktops it usually, so if this is my screen, I'll usually get it in this corner on Mac OS, and I'll get it on this corner in on Windows. So they try to be less obtrusive on a desktop, because it shouldn't basically, its intent isn't to capture your complete attention. It is just to distract you, to be notified of that task. It doesn't have to take up all of the space you have, because the desktops have a lot more space. And yeah, so the next slide will be errors. So the thing with errors is, it's a very elaborate topic. It's a very complex topic in just the field of user experience in general, because there's multiple ways of getting it wrong. So what you see pictured here is actually a mix of the two, and there are a few of them which successfully achieve what they're trying to do, and some of them fail to reassure the user in the time of an error occurring. So this, again, all the ones pictured over here, you can see they're all the desktop type of errors. The way smartphones and the mobile medium does it nowadays is generally, like I said, via haptics. And so there is a very distinct, it's very hard to picture in a slide, but the very distinct type of haptics which happens when there is a negative result from the interaction. So you'll have successful taps of vibration to just detect the fact that something has gone wrong. And it's over time, we've like I mentioned in the last session, a mental model is built around that haptic feedback. So just let's have a look at these error messages over here, and you can see that, just one second, let me just, yeah, so you can see over here that, let's look at the first one over here. So this is the Windows 10 setup error, and it just says something happened and something happened again, and it doesn't say anything else. So now this is a case where there is almost no clarity in what caused the error, or what exactly is happening. So while the user needs to be notified about an error, they also need to be notified about what caused it, so that they can fix it, or they can avoid going through the same issue again. So that's the problem with that one. Just one second. So clarity is key, basically. So it's key that when you're writing error messages, your clarity has to be top priority. You need to describe what happened and why it happened, and what the user can do about it. And it should be written in plain language. So that brings us to the second one. So if you look at messages like this Outlook synchronization, or this error over here, so both of them try to explain the error in terms of developer terms, where they're trying to, here it's saying the API call accepts a symbolic name. So that's the internal error which has happened. And over here, it's overtly descriptive of the issue. It's trying to explain the issue, a lot of text. So both of these things will not work well with a common user, because they they don't really need to know any of this information. The intent over there is to understand the issue as quick as possible so that they can rectify it, and that is not achieved by these two. Whereas now, if you look at the bottom two, these are two examples of how to do it right. Now, this information can be useful if the person is more technically advanced. So what Windows does nowadays is they have a show details panel in every error screen, where anyone who can understand the nuances of the situation, they can open the details and they can try to understand the situation with for further steps. Or for a simple user, they can try to use the inbuilt troubleshooting methods which are there. And similarly over here, what you see is simple language. So if you're deleting a playlist, you don't need to explain what is causing this error. You just need to explain what the user facing part of it will mean. So they will be deleting a playlist, and they can be, if choose not to be notified about this again, since they know what they're doing. And these buttons do not need an explanation. So it's a delete or a cancel, where they can ignore it, or they can go ahead with what they were trying to do. So yeah, so that's how errors work on the desktop platform. And like I mentioned, on smartphones, it's a very pop-up and haptic oriented experience. So with since we've seen actions and commands, basically so far you should have a general idea of how people tend to interact with these devices. So there's a fundamental difference in how you interact with them and how they process your interactions. So that leads us to the second topic. So organizing content is something which is fundamental to how a user experiences an application on both of these platforms. And it's the whole point of this topic is to explain how to present the same information on different platforms in a format which is taking advantage of each of the platform's strengths over there. So let me just start with the desktop. So the desktop, like I mentioned, the benefits of a desktop is ample space. There is a lot of available space to present your content over here. So what generally has become a trend, it's not anything new, but it's always been like this. But what has happened on the desktop platform is the use of columns. So it's something which is distinct and something which is only possible on a larger screen. But you'll notice on almost every application, at least in full screen, will size up to have numerous columns and sections where you can work. So there'll be a toolbar, or there'll be a menu bar over here, and there'll be a certain tool. So this is Photoshop on the left. So that's a power user. That's a power tool. But even if you look at something simple like Spotify, you will have your list of playlists. You'll have recent friend activity, and your general feed will be over here. So it'll split up the content into different sections so that it's easier for the user to navigate between each of those sections and get to what they want faster. So that is one thing which is unique to the desktop, because on the mobile you cannot really do the section on the portrait view which is available usually. So one second. Yeah. How does mobile do it? So mobile has the idea of scrolling. So since touch makes it so easy to scroll, it's not it doesn't require a scroll wheel anymore. It doesn't require any continuous, your hand doesn't have to move all the way to your mouse or to your trackpad. You already have the device in hand. So all you have to do is just simply swipe up. But this has caused a culture of continuous scrolling. So this is something you most probably have noticed in a lot of platforms. But continuous scrolling is very common in social media, for example, where people will keep scrolling through content as in an endless feed. So these endless feeds are a result of this interaction, and they take advantage of the portrait view over there. So how a desktop takes advantage of the landscape and its larger space available. The portrait view on a smartphone enables continuous scrolling. So the same application which you saw before, an app like Spotify, how they would deal with it is they will have the player in a mini player at the bottom, and you scroll through all of those three sections in one straight go. So while it might not be as efficient for someone who's looking for, one particular thing in each section, uh, it does allow for, it tends to promote discoverability. So the user will tend to scroll for longer, so you can feed them more content, and they'll tend not to get bored from that content on a smartphone rather than on a desktop. um, and this applies across multiple apps. You'll It's very rare that you will see an application open up into sections uh, on the home screen, rather than have one feed with cards and just one continuous stream. So moving back to desktops, what makes a desktop unique? So tabs and windows are something which are fairly unique to desktops, and they haven't quite, transferred to the mobile medium in the way they work on, like, right now on the desktop. So what I mean by that is the relative space which you have in a desktop is very different. The way that space is perceived and used is very different on the desktop than even a tablet, which might have the same space. Nowadays, there are 12, 13-inch tablets which are equivalent to a laptop, but the way it deals with the space is completely different. So a tablet experience would tend to give you just one app at a time, a focused experience, while a desktop, generally we all use our desktop with multiple applications and windows open and kept all across our space. So we keep switching between these applications, and a fundamental reason for this is the tendency to compare. So users on a desktop are more likely to compare. They're more likely to have one task open, like you'll have your browser open and a PDF open, to fill content from one to the other. Or you might have, you're writing a document in reference to another web page. So that's why things like split screen have come into play. So split screen, like you can see over here on Mac OS, and there are multiple ways of doing this. And on Windows, you can just snap windows to the side to resize them to a particular way. So all of these are tools which enable a workspace. A workspace is when especially on a desktop, it is when you get to organize your applications and your content in like a way which mimics a real workplace. So before computers existed, with physical files and folders, you will organize your own workspace into different sections and within the same table, and that's the same type of experience a desktop tries to offer. And the same goes for tabs. So mobile browsers also, you do not see them, you can't quite switch between them the way you do on a desktop, where you can see all of the tabs at the same in a row, and then you can click to compare between each of them. So that is again one more thing which is unique to desktops. But so moving to mobile, how they deal with it is by using a card system. So this is something which is a new like user interface trend. It's built over the last 7 years or so, but it's become wildly popular thanks to Google's material design and a lot of other design trends. But basically, it's what I'm talking about here is a card-based UI system. So what I mean by that is, over here you can see in this one example how there are different like sections in each of the screens which have a certain, they have a certain image and they have a certain set of tasks in it. So what it does is it groups all of the content you see on mobile into these sections. And this is something which is not exactly new. The use of the word cards is mostly just the way it looks, the interface. But grouping content and grouping features is something which is available on which has been available on desktop for a long time. So if you think of, for example, Microsoft Office, and you have the all of your tools on top, you notice that some of the tools are grouped into a certain area. They'll have a common type of function across those tools, and they'll all be grouped in one space together. So what a card does is kind of similar to that. It tries to combine the similar elements of a certain screen and make it into one cohesive look. So even if it's something where you're going to scroll through it, you'll know that this section is the scrolling part, and then that is the header. So the card system has really enabled that segmentation when it comes to mobile. So yeah, then so now that we saw different types of like affordances and how both of those platforms deal with their respective content in organizing it, we'll see how an experience can be built which carries between both of these platforms seamlessly. So that is something which is the basis of responsive and adaptive design. But the thing to note is this is primarily for web applications. So it's for websites and browsers. This is a design system which is used uh, like it's almost essential in today's world, because if you have a desktop site and not a mobile site, it's almost very like it's almost impossible to find a website which is not compatible on mobile. And that has been enabled using a lot of APIs and a lot of design templates which enable this very responsive and adaptive design. So we'll see what that is. And so we'll start with adaptive design. So adaptive design was what came first. It was basically a user interface design that adapts to specific screen sizes. So when the smartphones and tablets were introduced, the website developers were faced with a problem where their desktop websites looked basically unreadable. They were unreadable on all of these newer platforms. And the fact that these platforms had cellular connectivity, where that they could open the internet anywhere, was significant, because it meant people were opening the desktop sites on their mobile and having to zoom in and have a lesser user experience. So what adaptive design aimed to do was to have certain layouts, a very fixed way of processing a screen for specific screen sizes, because there weren't a lot of devices back then. So there was something like the iPhone, which introduced the touch screen to the mainstream market, and it had a web browser. So what they decided to do is to make one the just a simple continuous feed, like I mentioned before, the scrolling type of interface, and that would be for any aspect ratio beyond this certain level. And similarly, for the tablet, it'll be this a fixed layout. So there were generally 3 to 7 layouts which were built, and it was set to the specific aspect ratio. So that used to be the screen width. So the 320 or 480, 760, it used to be fixed between them. Again, I think there are some questions in the chat. What is the main difference between adaptive and responsive design? So yeah, we'll be seeing that. Both of them have adaptability to the screens. Yeah. So let me just go to responsive design to clear that. So responsive design, the main difference is that it basically resizes very smoothly. This is something which has replaced adaptive design. A lot of people get confused thinking that both of them are existent as two different design methods, but basically responsive design is an iteration and evolution of adaptive design. Adaptive design used to be for specific aspect ratios, like I mentioned, but responsive design basically enables smooth transition between all of those stages. So perhaps this I don't have a good animation over here, but what would be the case is when you have this website on a desktop, and even if you just change your browser aspect ratio, it will automatically resize to the tablet, and it will automatically resize to your phone, and there will be a very seamless and smooth experience over there, rather than adaptive. So adaptive, what used to happen is, if you had say a browser and then you changed the size of the browser, it will snap between this experience to this, rather than being a smooth one. I'll explain how this happens. Just one second. Visually and emotionally more responsive. Yeah, visually yes. I don't know about emotional. It is basically, it'll enable a very smooth transition, and that's something which is essential, since there are laptops, and there are just screens with almost every aspect ratio in the market, and designers cannot be expected to do an adaptive design ideology for each of those displays. It's not practically possible. So what you'll see generally is, you'll see a website which is both mobile capable and desktop nowadays, but they will be responsive between each and every size between those two. It will whatever space is available in the browser, the content will resize to it automatically. Uh, so yeah. Next one is the fluid grid system. So this is what basically, this is how it works. This is how responsive design works. So what has happened nowadays is, there's been basically a coalition between both of those mediums of adaptive and responsive. So like I said, adaptive had different layouts for each of those platforms, right? Responsive, what it does is, it will try to hit each of those points, but it will do it smoothly. So before, responsive used to be just the same mobile site sized automatically to the desktop. That was not exactly the best way of doing it, since like I said, columns and the wider screen has a lot of other benefits. So using a column type approach to showing the content is better for a larger display. So what has happened now is, it's a mix of both. It's a mix of both adaptive and responsive, where it will size smoothly, but also change to these different layouts, so that it looks visually optimized for each platform. So how they do that is using the fluid grid system. So basically, the fundamental reasoning behind it is, yeah, exactly, Bootstrap is how it works is using this. So elements occupy the same percentage of space, however large or small the screen becomes. So why are there 12 columns in Bootstrap? So there are different types of fluid grid systems, and there is no particular system which is right. I think the 12 column system is generally regarded as the most optimized one, and that's because it basically resizes in a way which is, the user cannot discern between that change. So what is happening is, one second, let me just open one thing. So yeah, what basically is happening underneath all of it is, when you resize this screen, each of these columns will move closer to each other, and they will become thinner. So when that happens, your experience will basically try to maintain that same ratio within each of those columns. So if this is your content, you have 2 columns of content here, 3 columns here, and you have 6 columns here. If how the width of your content is, will resize to exactly that section. And why there are 12 columns is because when it resizes in that way, it will not look like it's a huge change. So if you had only 2 big columns, and you're trying to resize to that section, it'll be like, basically you'll be able to see the change, and also it'll not scale up well to how a desktop site generally is. You'll notice desktop sites will have at least how much is this, 3 6. So there's like a maximum of 12 columns is pretty common in terms of buttons and the way a website looks. More than that would be too many visual elements on the screen, and lesser than that would just fall into any one of these categories. That's why 12 is used, so that that's the most that's the best, like that's the worst case scenario basically. So it can cover all of the ones below it, so the ratio will stay constant between all of them. And yeah, so content prioritization. So if you guys have any questions, you can ask instantly. I have the chat open, so you can ask any questions. Content prioritization. So prioritization of content is very, very essential for any platform. It doesn't matter because of the fact that websites have become, they try to capture your attention now, and it's actually become a hidden mental model where people know that when you open a website, they need to find what they're looking for instantly within the first fold of it. So this is called a two-fold mechanism. I've not written it in the slide. So how it works is, it'll work best if you see a newspaper website. So if you see the New York Times, you have basically they're trying to mimic a newspaper. So what you'll see is the centered name, the headlines, the spacing, all of that, which their layout is basically trying to mimic a real newspaper. And like a real newspaper which opens up, you need to understand that yeah, exactly, like a Kindle. So what happens in a website is, you open it, and like even right now what you see on my screen is this aspect ratio. You see this much content at first, and then you have to scroll. Basically you have to interact to move down. So what the twofold mechanism says is, when you have a website, if this is a website, it will unfold like a newspaper to show the secondary stuff. So what you have on the first fold has to be highly critical. So all the critical content is presented in the first fold. That's why a news site, for example, will have all of the breaking headlines in the front, and then as you scroll down, they'll have categories and basically things where you can find whatever else you were looking for. So that would be the secondary content. And what is also important is to group all of your content. So one is to prioritize each of these groups, so that the users can find related information together. So here, if you see, you will see all of the categories are listed in the same place. So it's all grouped. The person knows that this is where the items, the categories will be there for the news. And then for sections like the news and like current updates, they know it will be in this corner. So it is something which people will, with time, be able to basically navigate through your site faster. So that'll be the grouping. And third is relevance, obviously. So if you have content, you need to make sure that it is relevant, because basically the user's working memory is highly limited. So like I said, with the twofold rule, they have like memory limits of what they will be perceiving. So make sure the content is relevant. And there's a whole, it's basically a whole field called UX writing, where UX writing and content prioritization has multiple methods of doing it. So there are graphs where prioritization graphs which will basically establish how relevance is in for each of those platforms. So yeah, keep that in mind. And how this will work on a smartphone is, it's very similar, but like I said, scrolling is common on a smartphone. So you can tend to take advantage of that, because the twofold rule is less applicable over there. It is still highly important that you keep all critical content in the front, but you can also have the user scroll through a long feed and have them just equally interested in the content below. So yeah, that was responsive and adaptive system. So that was mostly with website and like website development across both of those platforms. How many pages are standard for scrolling? So nowadays you'll notice even Google has stopped using the page system in scrolling. They are also trying to implement this continuous scrolling. So the whole industry is going towards infinite page system. So there is no recommended number of pages anymore. It used to be there, where you can see that Google used to have 9 pages where you can click on, and then they'll have every consecutive set of pages later on. But basically, the continuous scrolling has enabled this culture where people will keep scrolling, and the most relevant stuff will be on top, and they're very it's basically this the graph is like you're very less likely to find what you're looking for at the bottom of that page. So the chances that people will keep scrolling will go down in any of those situations. But yeah, like like Ritu was saying, continuous scrolling has become basically the standard norm for things like Instagram and Facebook and all of these social media experiences that people have on their phones. Same thing is carrying forward to the desktop now, because people have become used to that type of experience. Will that affect screen reader users? Yes. So adaptive, sorry, not adaptive, accessible design has actually gone forward from this, because the way screen readers work is people just they'll highlight portions of what they want to understand from the screen, and they'll be able to get that information. And pages were actually um, restrictive from that experience, because now they know how much content is there. And this like I said, because of content prioritization, which is it's a consequence of this continuous scrolling too, important information has ended up completely on the first page. And so because of that, it's not exactly hindered accessible design, but it's not vastly improved at all. It's not it didn't change that experience much. More interactive and reliable. Yeah, basically it's more interactive. That's true, because it's based on your own feedback instead of the site being like interactive and responsive on its own. The user has to keep scrolling, and a lot of websites nowadays you'll notice animations and transitions based on the scrolling. This is something which a lot of product pages do a lot nowadays. When you scroll, there will be interaction. There'll be animations which will go with your scrolling. So they're trying to take advantage of that interaction instead of a tab view where you just go through the pages yourself. It's become more interactive in that way. So yeah, we can go to the next topic. So the next one is design systems. So design systems are basically these whole models of design templates which will be common for a particular platform. So they're designed by the developers of a software platform, who will give guidelines to how to design for them. So before I move into that, I'll just make sure page navigation in desktop will be is it wrong to say obsolete? Page navigation will never become obsolete. So page navigation on desktop is the thing is, continuous scrolling would work within each of those pages, but like I said before, with the workspace thing on desktops, tab views are very unlikely to go. So even let me just go back a bit. So even if you see this website, they have a form of tabular approach already. So this is just a new site, and they're trying to show their categories. But if you see anything, even if you see a website for a product, or if you go to the Apple site, or if you go to Microsoft site, you'll notice that there's always going to be a tabular structuring on top. That is something which is not going to change, because there's no better way of doing it. It's moved towards hamburger menus on the smartphone, but on the desktop it is always going to be front and center, because it's something which the desktop enables with its space. The hamburger menu is, like you can see over here also, it started coming up on the desktop also, and that is also promoting continuous scrolling, because you're less likely to click on this and then select your topic. But yeah, the fact is that page navigation is always going to be part of desktops. Gen Z is more into visualization and animation rather than reading. Yeah, so the lesser the content, the better actually. So if you prioritize your content better, you will have better effectiveness in delivering your information. So yeah, let's go get into design systems. So first, so yeah, what is a design system? So a design system is a system of components that lets users accomplish their tasks without regard to many different devices, screen sizes, or operating systems, etc. So this has been done by a lot of companies. I'm going to be talking about three ones from these companies, but be it even a company like Airbnb, for example, they don't have products. They don't have any physical products or operating systems which you need to design for, but they have a certain. Every company will have a design system, design language, and basically a cohesive set of rules for what will make their design unique. So if you're designing for them at any point, so for example, if you have an Airbnb link within your website, if you're trying to show that you can book Airbnb on this other page, you will have to follow their design system so that people will know instantly through their mental model. They will know that this is the certain protocols. So it's basically it will associate with the brand very strongly. So and also it benefits the user because of the mental model it will build on. So I'll be talking about that with some examples. But yeah, firstly, the pillars of a design system. So there are a total of six main, like, fundamental parts of a design system. Purpose and shared values. So purpose and shared values is basically it's important to understand and align the design team with a clear set of goals. So when basically a design system is for designers and not the users, so it's important to keep that in mind. So what you're trying to do is you're trying to enable shared values and purpose in those designers. They're trying to have the same values as that particular platform. And then design principles, you have to start making guidelines. Basically this is sorry not you, the designer. The platform will be providing principles for how to use their language a certain way. So that is both of this brand language and design principles go hand in hand in that. They basically brand language would include everything from fonts, colors, the logo, icons. Every major website, which has a certain type of design, will have a branding page. If you go to any website, you can go to the bottom and you can see there'll be a branding page where they'll show you how to use their logo, which colors to use them in, because these are things which are actually important, and they're enforced also. You cannot use, for example, you cannot use the Apple symbol on your website if you're going to change the colors beyond the colors which they want it to be associated with. So it's basically it's something which will reinforce the brand's image, but also the users will know exactly. It's also a thing of trust. So when you see that particular color scheme and design language, users tend to know that it is the actual company. So something which will reinforce the brand image. And then components. So components can be seen like, components are like Lego blocks, like where you have to piece. If you're trying to make an application, for example, if you're trying to make an Android app, you can put together all of this material design components and make your application. You'll use the buttons, you'll use the hamburger menu, you'll use the top menu bar. All of it will be pre-made because material design wants you to use it a certain way, and then you can just paste it. And this is something which has become a lot easier recently, because especially for operating systems, if you're trying to develop applications, the all of the developer platforms have inbuilt libraries for this design system, for the respective design system. So if you have Android Studio, adding a button will by default be, it'll have the material design in it. So you don't have to, unless you go out of your way to change that, it'll not matter. Then patterns. So design patterns are the basically instructions or recommendations from the OS developer or the website developer, that you basically need to use the components that they're providing effectively across all of your products. So if you have multiple products which are using a design system, they have to have a certain pattern across all of them. Then finally, you have to have documentation. So when there's a design system in place, you will notice that there is extensive documentation explaining each of those decisions. Why is it curved a certain amount? Why is it, or how much is it curved? So all of this, like every single factor will be documented, where everything from the font to the color. So if you see, they call style sheets also sometimes. If you see the style sheet for material or Apple's human interface guidelines, which we'll be covering, you'll notice that it's a huge document with every single element of user interface, uh, and basically it'll provide all of that information to every other designer so that they can have the same types of values in it. So what are the benefits of this? So why use a design system? So one thing is it enables you to scale very easily. So when you make a system of interchangeable and reusable parts, especially for a large corporation or a company which has multiple products, it's easy to scale between all of those products. So and it's also easy to scale with different groups. So if you're, for example, if you are hired into a bigger company, it's easier for you to understand their design language and system just by looking at the design system they have. And since these are publicly available resources, it's something you can develop even outside. Like you don't have to work for a company to understand that. So that's basically the idea. It can scale up to newer employees, to newer departments, products, and basically anything the company puts their hands in, it will scale between them seamlessly. Let me know if you manufacture any product, then there's some standards like ISO we need to. I want to know there are any standards. Yeah, so there are no. It's not as serious as like hardware design, because hardware design requires some safety protocols also. So I'm not sure what ISO is for, but I know it's a very important type of branding for a product. So there is no basically there's no rule of thumb for that. It's with the design system, you are like basically nudged towards preferably using a design system, but you can always not use it also. It's not essential to it. There are certain factors which are completely like, for example, on the Apple App Store, if you break certain guidelines, there are a few guidelines which are very, very strict. So for example, if you let me just, I don't know if you guys can see, but on a smartphone, like on an Apple smartphone, at least they have this bottom bar which is for going home, and they have basically that area is restricted. No application can have buttons in that area, and if you have buttons in that area, your app will be given a warning, and it'll be basically it is not enabling the user to even utilize your application in the right way. So it will be a hindered experience, so you will be given that notice regarding it. But it's not as serious as an ISO marking. Yeah, so that was scale, and efficiency is the second one. So basically, like I said, if you have consistency across all of your platforms, you'll also be more efficient. So you know how your product is going to look because of your design system, and that will enable you to get to the actual design of the newer platform you're trying to build a lot faster. So all of the fonts and the colors you need to follow, so you already have those in place. So what you can look at is making the newer parts of it, basically making interactive parts and like the newer aspects of what you're trying to build. Then third is teamwork. So yeah, design systems aren't just for designers. So it's important to understand that they facilitate collaboration between all of the teams. So if it's a developer or a designer or a product manager also, it will enable a smooth process between all of them. And so every one of the stakeholders in a project will be benefited from this design system. So yeah, and basically one thing which is it's mentioned in the design system thing by Nielsen Norman is that they have a defined shared vision. So they provide like an illusion of agreement. So even if people are, in slight disagreement of certain idea, a design system, since it's a, it's a overlapping, like a overshadowing effect of the company itself, like the image of the company itself, it is something which everyone will generally agree to. It will create an illusion that, okay, everyone is on the same page, even though there might be some disagreement. Otherwise, it is something which is enabled, and people will tend to agree with the rules which are set across the industry, because you cannot change that across all of your products and the devices and experiences. So yeah, those are the benefits of it. But then many design systems are built up with one second. Um, any good textbook reference material for design systems? Yeah, I'll be talking about few specific ones, and then you can look up those ones yourself. I'll be talking about material design and Microsoft's Fluent UI, I think it's called. So you guys can go. I'll drop the link also after towards the end. But yeah, all of the design systems are built using an atomic structure. So what I mean by that is, basically, I actually should have used a better visual. So this, multiple atoms make a molecule, multiple molecules make an organism, multiple organisms, make a template, and that makes a page. Like templates make a page together. What I mean by that is, the atoms are the smallest, building block of the UI system. So they are models, they are modules which can't be broken any further. So that will be like, the font or the color. So each of those are atoms. So like the typeface of your design system, the how the text input field will look, all of those things are individual atoms which will together make a grouping in a molecule. So anything related, so that'll be like, I think, what is a good example of that? Like, for example, a molecule would be a submit button. So how does a submit button look? And that will have atoms of the font of a submit button, the color of the submit button, and the design of it. So each of those elements will form a molecule, and now those molecules will form an organism, and that organism is generally a thing like the entire header for a page, or the entire footer for a page. And then all of those, like, like a sign-in tool, avatar, all of these things together will basically make a template, which would be one full page, for example. So one like the home page of a website, or a table which is formed on a website. So that would be one part of the website, and then all of these templates together, all of these pages together, will basically make the full product, which would be the pages. It's called pages, which is basically, it has multiple templates. So pages are basically the end product. It's what is filled with real content, and it is basically the final package which is sent out, and that will have all of these elements of the design system underneath it. So let's start with one of them first. So this is the most common one, probably, the design system of material design. So material design is something which has been in development for, I don't know, I think 12, 13 years by Google, and it is basically a system which is for Google applications on Android, iOS, Flutter, and all of their web applications. So even this Google Meet call, all of it is based on material design. So you can see over here, there's a video which is playing in YouTube, which shows how this components look. How do they go about it? They'll have everything from their card title, the buttons in it, input text, coloring, contrast, and all of these things are basically described in material design, including things like errors. And you can see there's an example of an error over here. All of this stuff is available as different components. So I'll show you more about that. So how they went about it, how did they build the system? So material is the metaphor, is what they say. So material design is inspired by the physical world, is what they're saying. This is all text from Google's own page, so it might be a little marketing type of thing. But basically what they're trying to say is they were inspired by real world textures. So, and it's all about how they reflect light and cast shadows. So if you see material design, even on this call, if you see, each of the buttons will have a slight shadow. They'll have a element of depth on top of it. So they're trying to mimic, how real world shadows work and how light is cast on flat surfaces. So that is basically the fundamental point of it. It's trying to redo the idea of paper ink by keeping this clean flat colors, which will have certain elements from the real world, so that it's something unique. And how do they do that? It's through a very intentional design. It's bold and graphic. So if you see everything from the typeface that they use, the grids that they use, all of them will be very bold. There'll not be any smaller boxes or anything. They'll always be properly defined sections of. Even on this Google Meet call, you'll notice that everything is. This is I think new design which they put on Google Meet. So you'll notice that every person's section is very clearly defined. There'll be very bold text on each of their icons, and basically it's the idea of it is to immerse the viewers in the experience. It's something which is very recognizable and very Google. So you'll see across all of their applications they'll have this type of a design language. So yeah, that is one thing. And then also, if you see the way they do animation, the way you won't see a lot of you will see a lot of animations across Google applications. Even if you just if you touch a certain button, you will notice like a cascading ripple effect just to show motion. So how the reason behind it is they're saying that it focuses your attention and maintains continuity through subtle feedback. So since like I said before, feedback on mobile systems are generally they take advantage of haptics, but Google's applications work across both the web and on phones and on the desktop. So what they've used instead of haptics is they're using a more visual feedback. So they're trying to show feedback through transitions and through visual elements where they're transforming on your screen based on what environment is there. So that is, motion provides meaning is what their idea is. And then they have their own components. They have components for display, components for navigation, actions, and communication. So they'll have all of this information is available on the Material Design website. I'll drop the link in the end. But yeah, you can just search Material Design online, and you can go to the website, and it's very extensive. There are full pages for just things like this button or the screen. They have a lot of extensive research based results on that page. So yeah, basically the point is you have all of these components. Material components are their interactive building blocks. So I'll just try to explain what each of these components are, because these are things which are there in every design system. It's not unique to material. So what is a display component? The display component is placing and organizing contents using things like the cards, which I mentioned for mobile, cards and lists and sheets on the display. What is navigation? So navigation is allowing the users to move through the product using all of the navigation doors and gestures and tabs. So things like your hamburger menu or your back button, all of that is navigation. You're going from one screen to the other, and that is called navigation. Actions are basically when you're allowing the user to perform a certain task using the component. So like the button, the submit button, or the plus icon in all of the Google applications. So all of that is, and those are actions, because you're enabling the user to do a certain task, a particular task. So everything from the search bar to the share sheet, all of that is an action. And communication is basically alerting users for key information. So what I did before with both feedback and notifications, that will be communication. So things like banners, dialogues, error messages, all of that, they're also called snack bars. All of those things are communication components, which are all generally all of these four items are described very well in a design system. So that was material. And also it's important to note, like, these systems are always evolving. They're never constant. They don't stagnate. Just because they have a design system in place doesn't mean it stagnates. So what, for example, with Google itself, material I think last month they released Material U. It's a newer format of material design, which is more personalized, and it's there on Android 11. So Android 11 basically gives you a very personal experience. So your wallpaper on your phone will basically determine the color scheme for the entire operating system. So it'll derive from that. So you can also change things like the font weight or the weight of each button UI, and they're basically giving more customizability to the user and trying to make it more personal, so that every person's experience in every Android phone will have a very unique, design, which is personal to that user. So they can make changes to things like that. So yeah, that is Material U. But going to Microsoft's Fluent UI. So Fluent UI is a set of UX frameworks for cross-platform applications for Microsoft. So as Microsoft is there on the web, they're there on Windows, iOS, Android, macOS, and they also have cross-platform applications for Linux and all of that. So basically, they need the Fluent UI is a design language which is consistent between all of those applications. So wherever you use a Windows application, they'll have a certain style, and that will be Fluent UI. And one second, I think there's one more picture here. Yeah. So yeah, that is Fluent UI. And what are the elements which they talk about are similar to what I mentioned before. So they have the colors, the color schemes which they have to use, and the color schemes are generally associated with the brand. So if you see Office, for example, PowerPoint is orange, Word is blue, Excel is green. Something which is very distinct in your memory. Even see, I'm not even referring to anything. I know that is how it looks, and that is something which they maintain throughout. So if you see, even the web version of Excel will have the same. Yeah, exactly. So the mental model is already built, and so people already associate those colors with that brand, and it's a brand within already the existing brand of Microsoft Office. So it's something which people have associated with that particular software and that particular application. So they have unique colors for each of them. Similarly, iconography will be consistent in all of them. And one second, fundamentals, human-centered and easy to grasp. Yes, exactly. So yeah, iconography, for example, is a very huge element. Let me actually just one second pause this presentation. I'll just show you one thing. So to make this presentation itself, I've used a certain design language sort of thing, but it's from Apple. But it's basically, this is something which is common in all, it's then multiple platforms. All the platforms have their own sets of icon packs. So icon packs are unique to each platform. So for example, you see all of these symbols, they're not inherently unique symbols, because there's everyone's got a share button and everyone's got a send button, but they will have a certain weight and size over here, everything which is, yeah, exactly, semiotics and semantics. Basically, it's consistent across all of their platforms. Every icon I see, even my battery icon over here, will be consistent in, there will be a battery icon inside this pack, which will be consistent across those the products which are made by this company. So that's something that's what I'm trying to say. So things like these, the elevation, iconography, layout, all of these things are predefined, and they're what make the products so memorable. And it's important to know all of this if you're trying to develop for each of the platforms. And yeah, so go to the next slide. So yeah, like I said, so that was Microsoft Fluent UI, and there's also Apple, who has rules for each of these things. So they have one for macOS, iOS, watchOS, and tvOS. And the idea is that all of these platforms will work smoothly between each of them, providing a cohesive experience under the Apple brand. All of these things can be found online, by the way. You can just put Apple Human Interface Guidelines, or you can put Apple Design, and it'll take you to the design page. Any website you want to go to, if you want to find a design style for it, you put that company's name and you put the design you can put design system or design style, and you'll find the respective page for it. So yeah, we'll just move on to the final topic, which is just cross-platform design. I'll be doing that with like a minor case study. I was planning on doing 2 case studies, but I couldn't get the time. I'll probably just mention it. But yeah, so cross-platform design is a mix of both of what I've been talking so far. Uh, so far I've been talking about how there are unique experiences on each platform, but there are a lot of applications which are built for both desktop and for mobile. You'll notice this Google Meet is there on both on the browser and on the phone as an application, and that's an example of web and and a mobile app. There are also desktop apps which are also there on the mobile. So these are things which there needs to be a certain, all of these things which I've talked about, all of these will be packed into one idea when you're trying to do a cross-platform application. They have to use design systems. They have to take note of the benefits of each platform, and they need to also be aware of the types of interactions on each of those platforms. So yeah, so how do they do that? So a very common thing, trend in the industry right now is mobile first. So because of how common it's become to own a smartphone, like if you see in India, people are much more likely to own a smartphone than even a desktop computer. So people are generally nowadays being exposed to the mobile first, and that's something, easy access, exactly. So it's something which is completely shifted in the trend. So because before, like I think in 2000s, it was more of people who had a computer first were the ones who could buy a mobile phone, because it was a novelty product. It was something which wasn't essential. But then now, with time, everyone got mobile phones first, but then they were not smartphones. But then now, with how easy and cheaper smartphones have become, it's basically enabled people to own a smartphone first rather than a desktop computer. That's haven't even, like, children generally get their phone first, and they have a shared computer, but they have their own unique devices for themselves, be that in like an iPod or something, or there's basically they have a mobile product for each of themselves. So the point I'm trying to make is, yeah, and it's cheaper too, exactly. So it's basically, the idea is that mobile is nowadays tending to become a more important platform to cover. But then this is not like a rule of thumb. It's not something which is generally true. Graceful degradation is the opposite of mobile first. So graceful degradation is when a desktop application is taken and you degrade its features to accommodate the experience on the phone. So what you see over here, for example, what I'm trying to say is that mobile has a few elements which are unique to it. So like I've been mentioning all along, so they have things like they can always notify you, for example. So if you are making like you see over here, if you're making a flight ticket application, you're more likely to you better have a mobile app first than a desktop app. When's the last time you've seen a desktop application for website booking, or like booking stuff? All of this will be pushed to the browser on the desktop, but then the benefits of mobile are they can be taken advantage through a mobile application. So the idea is that you design for mobile first, okay, and by doing that, you will have, basically, since mobile has more limitations than the desktop, you will basically maximize your user experience for the mobile. And then once you've done that, when you make it for the desktop, you will be able to preserve that user experience to the next platform. And same thing with graceful degradation is, you try to incorporate all of the complexities of your desktop applications, and they strip them for your smaller devices. So what are good examples of this? So a mobile first application would be something like this, any form of booking application, any form of wallet, payment, all of those things, anything which is time sensitive, or where it needs to notify you, or where it needs for you to open it very often to use remotely. that will be mobile first. Whereas graceful degradation will be something if you are, for example, this application I'm using, my PowerPoint, like my PPT thing on my iPad now, but that is something which was not built first. They first built it for the desktop, and then they built, they've degraded it with lesser features, so that I can control my presentations, or I can make quick changes on the go. So it is not nearly as extensive as the desktop experience, but it provides whatever is required for a mobile experience. So that is graceful degradation. And so the example I was about to talk about over here is Discord. So I don't know how many of you are aware of Discord, but Discord is basically it's a chatting service. It's a messaging client for targeted towards the gaming industry primarily, but especially during this pandemic era, people have noticed its benefits across multiple mediums, as just as a communication tool itself. And they have both a website client, and they have also a client for the for all platforms on the phone. So what they've successfully done is, why I chose them is basically they have been able to create an experience without, like, they've done graceful degradation in a way where not even one of the features is gone. Like, they have, maybe there are lesser things with the keyboard, but almost every element in terms of like visuals and in terms of functionality features have all carried forward to the next platform seamlessly. So you can see even in this, I'm not sure, I don't think they're the same page, but you can see that the general uh, the way you perceive this application on mobile and the desktop makes that they're both both coherent, and both of them are very basically the same application. But what makes it unique is basically they have a certain tone and language. It's fun, and it's not a very corporate and serious look. You'll notice all the error messages are either jokes or animations, which are funny animations, and it's full of basically interactions which are highly responsive. So they have visual feedback in multiple ways, and very active environment. And yeah, they also have the benefits of their system is they're so robust that they've basically enabled numerous forms of flexibility and accessibility. Especially like they allow a very casual user to use it, but also a power user to actually take advantage of all of their features. And they also have, like, I think, a pro segment where you have to pay for it. It's a subscription model, but it allows for even more professional features. So an example of that is the micro interactions. They're comfortable and they're familiar, and everything that I'm showing, they're common between both of the platforms. So what they've achieved successfully is something which is it's there on both the platforms without hindering the experience at all. Everything from the smallest animation to the most complex features which they offer, they've basically found a way to showcase them on both platforms this in the exact same manner. And how it's possible is I think they use a Chromium based platform, a web based platform, which allows them to basically, it's a web application, because you can open Discord on the web also. So it's basically available everywhere, and since it's based on a web application, it's able to have the same experience through responsive design across all of their platforms. And yeah, so that just brings me to the point that on when it comes to cross-platform, it's all about consistent design. So it's important to remember that users are going to want to like associate both of those products the same way. And so things like placement of your UI elements, the way they look, and the icons you use, all of them need to be consistent between all those platforms. And yeah, so that was one example, but there are numerous other examples of good cross-platform apps. There's Spotify, there's there's a lot of desktop applications which are on the web also, which also carry forward into very good applications on the phone. Um, and yeah, so it's good to keep all of these things in mind for this. And I think with that, I'm done. So if you have any other questions, Facebook is they're a very good model for how the website client became an application, and then they went the opposite. They went mobile first with Instagram, even though they bought Instagram, but Instagram was an app first, and then it became available as a website. So LinkedIn, yeah, exactly. LinkedIn was the opposite. So that was again graceful degradation, and mobile first would be Instagram, so something like that. So if there's any questions, you guys can ask me right now.
Thank you, Karthik. Very good session. Very good interaction. As a part of curiosity, I have one couple of questions. Bootstrap is now commonly used, right?
Yeah, Bootstrap is part of the development process
for the web application. So any other better or the best other framework for the web development, web application development?
Right. I'm not going to talk about development because I'm not personally experienced in that.
UI framework.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So UI frameworks. So when you're trying to do some UI frameworks in design, you like even Bootstrap, for example, is not part of the general user interface design process. So if I'm trying to build a user interface, I will not be. Actually, I'll be talking about this in the evening session about what all platforms you can use to build user interfaces. But things like Bootstrap are their underlying UI frameworks for development. They're used by the developer, whereas what a designer does is they use, like what someone's asked also, what they do is they use an application like Figma or Adobe XD or Sketch, and they have their own tools to do what Bootstrap does within that application. So it is not a framework per se, because it's a canvas. It's basically like a canvas where you draw and you need to build the UI on that. And then based on that, there are frameworks which can do each of those design techniques. And Bootstrap is one of those for responsive design. So I think for development, you will have to just research on your own. No, I don't want to mislead you with some.
No, development. No, I am talking about only UI part.
Yeah. So the frameworks, what I said is, like, those design systems are the frameworks for UI. When you're doing design, you will have to look at the respective system for what you're building on. So if you're building for Windows, you'll have to use Fluent Design if you want to, but it's all optional. That's the thing. It's all optional. You can use a framework if you want it to be cohesive with that platform. So that is the only thing which is there in the design process. You use a design system as a framework to build your respective design. And
so what are the best practices? What are the best industry practices as far as this UI stuffs are concerned?
So I mean, that's a very broad question. Is there any particular type of
in UI framework only? In UI framework, so what are the best practices or any standard that has to be emerge?
Right. I mean, so there are some factors like readability and universal design for like basically making your product accessible. All of those are there across all platforms. But if it comes to just general rules, there's a lot of them. There's developing for desktop and mobile have their own. You can go to this website called Nielsen Norman Group, and they have basically.
I was about to tell Nielsen's heuristics, Norman heuristics, Sneederman's heuristics.
That's right. So you can go and see the heuristics for each of those platforms on that website. You can go to. I think I can type it.
Put the link.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. Okay. So that's what you can go to Nielsen heuristics, Nielsen Norman Group. It's called NNG. They're called. You can go over there and you can look up basically they've researched almost every aspect of both mobile, desktop, and user experiences and all platforms. So you can use all of these resources. They're researchers from the top researchers in the field that sir is mentioning in the chat, And yeah, you can find all of your rules for that, for be it web usability, be it mobile app interface, everything from a page layout to tab structure, everything is covered over there. So it's a very interesting read. You can check it out.
Okay. Okay. Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah. And someone asked which one is better, XD or Figma. I use XD. I think Sketch used to be the the designer's favorite before, but Sketch is only available on macOS. So I think for cross-platform XD, the benefits are it's a very good application, but Figma is easier to share across different platforms. If you have different people on the team and you don't have the paid version of XD, I think it's better to use Figma because you can just do it on the web and you can share your projects very easily. But yeah, XD is very powerful now. And what I like about XD personally is it's very simple. They have I think some 6 tools in the left side, and they have a few specific functions on the right. But it's very, very easy to use, and it's a very light application, and with a lot of support for plugins to do your work faster. So I would personally, I can vouch for XD. I've not used Figma much, but Figma is also a great application. Any other questions? Yeah, all right. Stop presenting. Font. Font isn't asking like about typefaces and icons. Okay. Yeah. So when it comes to user interface design, it's always better to use system. Like if you're making an application, there are a few sets of like readable fonts. But if you want to stay safe, you can just take the respective design system and take their font. For example, that would be San Francisco for Apple and Roboto for Android. Both of them are highly readable fonts. Always go for readable fonts. Don't go for cursive and all of that. Sans serif fonts are best for user interface design, unless your entire theme is like serif based, like how this presentation is. But yeah, you just make sure you get readability right. That is always important with fonts in in interface design. Icons, iconography, I would suggest just sticking to the respective design systems because they render properly on all of their respective platforms. But if you're building icons on your own, if you're trying to, I'm actually not sure. Do you mean like fonts and icons in interface design, or do you mean creating fonts and icons? Because both of them are very different.
Interface design. It is related to interface design.
Okay, yeah, because yeah, so then icons, that's what iconography, like I showed you, right? I showed you this SF symbols. That is by Apple, and they have a large set of icons. And if you want other icons, you can either make it in the same, yeah, any tools for icon design. So that would be a totally different topic. Making icons, people generally do
Shall
it on
we stick
Illustrator.
to material.io or is there any other platform also?
Sorry, could you repeat the question?
Shall we follow this material.io, material design from that Google,
Yeah.
or is there any other platform?
So material design would be for for Android, right? Like it'll be for Google related stuff. But there are also other frameworks. I'm actually not able to think of anyone right now. I'll try to mention it in the evening.
Yeah, please share whenever you like remember.
Yeah. I'll mention it in the evening session.
Thanks.
Yeah. Tools for icon design, generally, I think Illustrator is used pretty often for both typography and icon design. Illustrator is widely used. It's a very powerful tool.
Yes.
Yeah. So and what else? Yeah. Vector design. Yeah, vector design Illustrator is the like industry best right now. You can use something like InDesign if you're trying to make a document or like a magazine or something. But for general vector design, if you're trying to digitize files, or if you're trying to make your hand prototypes into that into a digital document, all of that stuff Illustrator is the best at. People
And anything,
often, yeah, anything,
yeah, basically, very often it happens like we have to, put some images on our website. And there is
yeah,
always a clash between the designer and the developer. He demands a very less size. But we
right.
have to somehow maintain the quality as well. So anything on this you
Yes.
take?
Okay. So always, if there is a choice between an image and if you are able to put a vector, always go for a vector. A vector is a SVG file. It's a scalable vector. Basically, what a vector is it's an image which can be scaled across any size without any increase in size in file size. So that is like generally both designers and developers really like vectors because it's easy to scale up and down. The only problem with vectors is they cannot do image like proper image shown. So for that you will just have to either compress images to a certain standard. Like you cannot use high resolution images on your website at all. You have to compress it. And I think there are tools like when it comes to things like Android Studio and all, for example, they'll automatically do this for you when you have images. But yeah, for website design, you'll have to compress it yourself and make sure you compress it using a tool like what is a good tool
Photoshop.
for it? Yeah, Photoshop has a really good compressor. So basically, it'll compress the file without making it look any worse. It'll remove artifacts which are not visible to the eye, and that itself is like if it's generally below 100 KB or something, it's more than enough. It depends on what you're trying to show also, but yeah, you have to compress images for websites, and if you can use vectors, please use vectors. Fonts
Thank you
recommended
so much.
for yeah, no problem. Fonts recommended for Android apps. Okay. Android did you mean apps or Apple or right? Fonts recommended for Android, like I said, Roboto is the default font for Android. It's something which is, I think that's what is used in Android itself, like your system interface. And there are you can go to Google Fonts, and you can find all the recommended fonts for Android over there. You can go to Google Fonts, and they basically all the fonts you can find there will be part of Android Studio also. So if you're building for Android, you can directly access the Google Fonts over there.
Great, Kenneth.
Yeah.
Thank you. In fact, just to mention it, his work syntax, right, with the company WorldWiz, it starts in the evening and then goes on till early morning. Okay, right? So normally, I think his normal get-up schedule is around 1 o'clock in the afternoon.
Yeah.
I have forced him to get up 10 o'clock. Yeah. I had the confidence because he's one of my past students, right? So I should thank Kenneth for disturbing his daily routine. Because I was very confident that his presence will make the practical flair enhanced.
Yeah, it's a very elaborate topic. This topic can span over like multiple
I think we can
sessions.
even have a workshop on this, right?
Yeah. We can do a workshop only on this topic. I find it very hard to.
At least one session on this, right? We give them the know-how that they should differentiate mobile issues from desktop issues.
Yeah.
One size fit for all will not work out generally.
Exactly. Yeah.
At least some adaptability is important.
Yeah. That's right.
Very good. Thank you, Kenneth. Right. So I think people have your email ID, right? And Kenneth will also be available in the afternoon session, where I think I've forgotten the faculty name here, that mind tree icon, right? Based on his input, I've asked him to explain one use case. I think his course project was excellent, right? So today's afternoon session around 3:30 will be by Kenneth, where he'll touch upon the various concepts. In fact, the way we did it in the course, I think they had to do some 4 presentations during the entire course. So at each stage of the course, based on the concepts covered, they mapped it to their idea. I hope that will be a good
Yeah.
exposure to overall. We can't expect a one-to-one mapping of every concept. 1 minute, yes, somebody is being on the bill. People can take a break, right, and maybe reassemble around 11:45, right? I know it is only a 10-minute break, but I don't think you get tea worth more than 10 minutes at home, right? Thanks, yeah. Thank you, Kenneth. Bye.
Yeah.